Dudes. I'm gonna make a little different video than I've ever done on the channel because I've only ever done battle replays. It's been a lot of really cool stuff that's come out in the last few days, and a lot of great content from the creators out there. A lot of people hypothesizing how some of these move tutors and some of these new Pokemon might play in their respective formats. VGC guys doing VGC, singles guys doing singles analysis. Gotta be careful. I gotta be careful with that one. Single guys doing single guys. Ooh, that's a bar in West Hollywood. Anyway, I wanted to cover some of the things in terms of a draft league format. Now, if you're watching this video, you probably trust my judgment in draft league format. And if you don't know and you just happen to stumble on it, I've got some experience in drafts leagues. I've played a few seasons. Won one of them. Technically two of them, but the league disbanded. But we're not going to talk about that. Made playoffs a couple times. There's one season where I didn't make playoffs. And we're not going to talk about that either. But anyway, I'm going to hop right into it. The first thing I want to discuss was sticky webs. Now, sticky webs was pretty limited in draft because you pretty much had Shuckle and Smeargle as like viable draftable mons. I've seen Leaveney get picked, and Leaveney's actually not too bad. I think Leaveney's a little bit slept on maybe, but it can do the job. We've got Masquerain, which gets sticky webs as well. I think that's another sleeper pick, but that's like the last pick overall. You really want sticky webs, that's probably what you grab if the others are taken. And I think like Ariados and stuff. Now we've got Slurpuff, who was a decent Pokemon in draft anyway because of Belly Drum, having a tremendous offensive presence. Very difficult to switch in on. Even if you have a counter, you kind of need like that priority bullet punch or something, because once this Pokemon gets going, it's hard to stop. Priority in general is a must when you face a team with Slurpuff. It could run a Calm Mindset, which was kind of neat, and it can also be a decent Cleric, although the bulk is a little underwhelming. It's not terrible, but in terms of bulky fairies, there's better options. Now Slurpuff has this new role of dishing out sticky webs. I think this improves its draft stock, not significantly, but enough that you might see it go a round or two earlier, or even get picked when it may not have been. I think in bigger leagues, maybe a round or two earlier, and in smaller leagues, maybe picked up when it wasn't necessarily. I don't think it's per se the best sticky webs user, because Shuckle can almost guarantee it because it can run stuff like Mental Herb and Sturdy, so it doesn't worry about getting KO'd, except by maybe like an Excadrill or something like that with Mold Breaker. Very few things can stop Shuckle from getting it done. Smeargle has to run a Sash. It does get Spore and things like that, but in general, I think Shuckle's probably the most reliable. Like, I need to set up sticky webs and go. Slurpuff, I think, is going to be the second best at this point because of that tremendous offensive presence, the types of switches it's going to force, or it's going to, you have to play a certain way around it, so I think it's going to be a great user of it. We also have Araquanid, who kind of a one-dimensional Pokemon. Most people, I would say, pick it up a little bit later in the draft. I've seen it picked up on rain teams and used effectively. It's always strong in Trick Room, thanks to those strong water bubble attacks. And of course, that growing in popularity, we'll say, that set where it's Spider Web, Rest, Liquidation, and Toxic. So you can like lock in like a Cofagrigus or something that you'd have a hard time wearing down. Toxic it, rest off the damage. Once you've trapped it with Spiderweb, of course. Now with Sticky Webs, Araquanid has an added dimension. Besides playing that sort of stall breaker role. God, words, man. And somewhat of a wall breaker, both in rain and out. Like, I think most teams will have counters to Araquanid's coverage, but it is a decent wall breaker to pick up late if your team needs it. Now it's that Sticky Webs mon as well. I think all three of these Pokemon, you're going to see Rabombi here too in a sec. I know it's already up on the screen. All three of these Pokemon, I feel like you improve when you get a new toy. I think their draft stock goes up a little bit, but not a ton, because I don't see any of these three going super early in the draft. Nobody's going to be like, oh, got to get Slurpuff first round. Slurpuff mid-round at best, Araquanid or Rabombi probably later rounds when you're like, you know what, I've checked all these boxes. I don't have sticky webs, and I really want it, and I want a Pokemon that does something besides set up sticky webs. Whereas Shuckle, you're pretty much your webs and rocks, and that's pretty much all you've got. With Araquanid, Slurpuff, and Rabombi, you're getting something else. Rabombi, of course, packing a decent Quiver Dance set and a very nice speed stat. One of the things I like about Rabombi as a setter is that it's fast, so you need a Prankster Taunt or Magic Code or something like that. The ways of dealing with it are a little more difficult than a slower Pokemon like Araquanid. It can also pivot right out of there, so you could get up your webs, pivot out, and if you use a sash and you're down to your sash, for instance, you have a sack to save for later. Maybe you can come in and pick off some weekend Pokemon with that nice speed stat. I think it's a little more useful in draft than people let on, but again, it's like one of those deals where like this is not going to be the fairy that you draft. First of all, it's going to be you're going to be filling in a specific role. In this case, probably sticky webs with a Quiver Dance option, and I do see it maybe going in when it wouldn't go before, as opposed to like being like a very desirable pick. And again, that's true for all of them except for maybe Slurpuff, which, man, if you've ever been swept by a Slurpuff, good God, if you've ever slurred your words like a Slurpuff, yeah. So that's the webs. I think all three of those are going to be good additions to teams, but probably not earlier in the middle of the draft. Maybe Slurpuff in the middle, like I said. Just like nice ways to round out your team and put webs on it. Next up, you see we've got a lot of new defoggers here. I'm not going to go through one by one for all of them because some of them share a lot of qualities that make them good defoggers or not. For instance, we have the Genies, not Torn T and Landorus, of course, but like regular Torn and Thunderous Eye and Klefki have that Prankster defog, which could be nice last minute, get rid of those rocks so something can come in and set up. I do feel that they're all decent defoggers, those three, but I don't necessarily think that you're picking them for their defogging potential. One of the things I expect to see in draft with all these added defog options is that you'll see slightly more offensive choices picked up in the draft, because whereas you were trying to squeeze in maybe some hazard removal, you already picked up Hydreigon, Florges, and Rotom Wash, for instance. Like, you picked up those. You have 3 defoggers on your team now, and those Pokemon were already good in draft. So with that box being checked more easily, it makes sense to see more offensive threats picked up as well. I do think one of the Pokemon that benefits from this tremendously is Silvally. In draft, it's already an interesting choice to have because it can play any type, of course. It can also be a pretty sneaky and pretty solid choice Scarfmon with a quick parting shot, maybe those nice ice beams. It's so much good coverage that this thing packs. Although the downside of Silvally was it never did any role especially well. It was sort of like oh shoot, I got a few holes I need to patch. Silvally can patch more than most Pokemon because of its typing. In terms of team synergy. Now, if you're drafting like that, you probably also need to work on the draft a little bit. I've been in that position before when I was first getting used to the drafts and stuff, getting some weird picks out there, and Silvally would have been nice for that. But one of the things now drawing is that ability to defog and parting shot out, potentially giving setup opportunities while getting rid of hazards. So if you defog the hazards and you get rid of those rocks and parting shot out into your Volcarona, for instance, you've got a really solid defogger who helps support the team, not just in defog. All of these Pokemon, I think, are viable. Maybe not Blaziken. I'm not so sure. And again, I only include that because a lot of leagues do include Blaziken. They incorporate complex bends more readily than Smogon does. It could be a defogger, no doubt about it. I think certain Pokemon like Florges might have a hard time fitting it under their moveset. Florges often runs like Wish Protect, and there's 2 slots right there, and Moonblast, of course. Heal Bell, Toxic, or not Heal Bell, Aromatherapy, or Calm Mind typically round out the set. But there's no reason you couldn't fit a defog in there. It's a bulky Pokemon with reliable recovery, not a terrible speed stat, better offensive stats than people realize. So I think this added dimension makes it increasingly difficult to prepare for, but ultimately, I don't see any of these Pokemon suddenly, except for maybe Silvally, rising up on your list much higher than they were before. Tapu Koko, for instance, is a Pokemon that's probably going to go in the first round, probably first 2 rounds, because it fills so many roles. If you've talked with me about prepping for leagues, I use a lot of common smogon terms like stall breakers and revenge killers and things like that. Tapu Koko checks a lot of those boxes. It has a great move pool. Um, Very difficult to predict to prepare for because it runs so many sets effectively. Having defog on it as well might seem like a surprise for your opponent, and might be surprising given how much other useful things it can do. But hey, in a pinch, if you need that defogger and you don't need the extra coverage or taunt or whatever you were going to pack on it in the first place, there's no reason Tapu Koko couldn't pull it off. It's a Pokemon that forces a lot of switches, and therefore probably free defogs and that high speed stat to pivot on out of there. An interesting choice too, I think, here that I want to talk about was Xatu. Xatu is an interesting defogger to me because it also has Magic Bounce, and you're thinking, oh, it doesn't need it, it has Magic Bounce. But if you play NU, one of the traps you can fall into, which happens constantly, is typically something like Steelix is their Stealth Rocks Mon, and you run a more physically defensive Xatu. There's a little bit of a mind game there with a Magic Bounce Pokemon. Do you switch it in and take the hit? I know they often run Rocky Helmet, but do you switch it in and take the hit? Maybe you're getting low. Do you need to save it for another threat on your team that maybe you didn't prepare for as well in the week that you're going? And you just really need to make sure that you pack defog for maybe a Pokemon that's weak to it. I think it's a good choice. It's got a decent speed stat. I think, what is it, like base 95? Even if you run some bulk in it, it's going to be, 95. If you run some bulk in it, it's going to be a decent Pokemon. Again, another one. Most of these Pokemon actually have U-turn or access to it, so you can defog and get the heck out of there. You can also bounce them back. I think Xatu becomes a slightly more interesting late round pick. Again, none of these move too much higher up on the list because of defog, but I do think that the increased prevalence is going to definitely change the way some people draft. I think that's all I really want to talk about with defog. If there's anything else, like, you guys think, if you think I'm wrong, like, oh man, the fact that Hydreigon gets defogged now, it's too good, it's busted. It's not, but if it is, let me know in the comment section. We'll have a discussion about it. Maybe you can change my opinion here. The new releases have also brought around a lot of really interesting new Pokemon, some new tech. I'm not going to get too far into it with the new Pokemon because I know there's a lot yet to be determined. Honestly, we don't know. One of the things that I'm really excited for is Drain Punch Buzzwole. The thing that makes Buzzwole so good to me is this crazy bulk, this crazy physical bulk. It has 107, 139. Obviously, the attack stat's very good. Speed, okay, you could get away with a Scarf in some matches. Obviously, you don't use it for these things, but it could be a decent Assault Vest user. Having Drain Punch on Buzzwole, now you don't have to rely on Hammer Arm, which can miss, Superpower, which drops your attack and defense. Again, bulk being one of the things that defines Buzzwole. And what's the other fighting? For those of you who didn't know, you can actually sort. I don't know who doesn't know this, but you can sort by a lot of different things. But in this case, we've got there's not a whole lot of Focus Punch. I don't know if I mentioned that. Brick Break. Brick Break actually has the same power as Drain Punch, and it could work if you're on an Aurora Veil team. But to reiterate my point about Buzzwole's bulk, it doesn't have to run Roost for recovery anymore, which leaves an opening while still getting health back. I think there's plenty of ways, like you see I have the Colbert on here. I think I was going to talk about lures or something. Just the idea of having not necessarily free subs, but subs and the ability to get most of your health back the following turn, giving you multiple opportunities to set up those subs is really awesome. I definitely think Buzzwole is going to be a little bit more popular because of this. I think it's BL right now in tiers, and I think it generally does get drafted unless the league's really small, because it's so strong and because that bulk. But a lot of people are hesitant to use it because of that 4 times weakness to flying. I still think it's a really good Pokemon with good coverage, and Drain Punch only strengthens the subset, which can win games. Also the bulk up Drain Punch. Oh my gosh, I'm really excited for this. And this really isn't anything new, but I've noticed a lot of Pokemon getting the laser focus, and I honestly didn't know it existed because I don't know everything about Pokemon, I guess, guys. I usually go on a week-to-week basis, but what Z Laser Focus does is it gives you a +1 attack, which isn't as good as Sword Stance, right? But Laser Focus also gives you that increased critical hit ratio with moves like Night Slash and Leaf Blade, and now this thing also gets knockoff. This is a lie. It actually gets knockoff. Now that it also gets knockoff, Kartana has such I don't know. I feel like Kartana is really hard to prep for in draft because there's so few actual counters. Slightly more checks, of course, but it's a very difficult Pokemon to deal with. And now with stuff like Laser Focus and maybe that crit Night Slash, or if you can have a crit Z move, for instance, the following turn, maybe you just use Laser Focus and let's say you're running Darkinium Z, which is I think what I mostly see on the ladder these days. Man, like even like so the way I used to counter Kartana before it was on the ladder this way, not just saying that to be a hipster, but kind of to be a hipster, was HP Fire Mega Scizor. A critical hit, Black Hole Eclipse, followed into Night Slash or not knockoff because it's Mega, but you see where I'm going with this. Maybe you use Sacred Sword or something. This Pokemon is going to decimate teams. And you can have this great utility if you don't want to run this particular set. If you're just running SD knockoff, it's pretty useful. I think and Darkinium Z with knockoff is a little bit stronger than Night Slash without the crit, of course. And another Pokemon, I don't know why I forgot to write this down. I've been critical of Toxapex in leagues in the past, simply because I think once you know it's coming, it can be very easy to deal with. I don't think that's the case anymore. And not that it got a ton better. It does get moves like knockoff now, which is ridiculous. Toxapex to me, again, so to just strengthen my claim here, one of the worst things that can happen is if your checks or counters have been to a certain Pokemon have been weakened or removed, and that Pokemon has an opportunity to get behind a substitute, Buzzwole for instance, Toxapex cannot break Buzzwole's substitute without tremendous special attack investment, in which case it's probably going to be to it KO'd by Earthquake without a boost. Well, it depends. Everything I'm saying is kind of an always depends because you never know what your opponent's going to bring. But what we're looking at is in terms of potential. Okay. Not to say that Buzzwole can still take advantage of Toxapex even with knockoff, unless it gets T-Spikes up beforehand. But I think one of the things, because again, another Pokemon that forces a lot of switches, items are really important. Maybe, I don't want to say more important, but they can, if your strategy hinges on, let's go back here, hinges on this Cobra Berry from Buzzwole. Let's say I have a Crobat with Infiltrator, and or I'm going up against one with Buzzwole, and I need this Cobra Berry to live that Infiltrator Brave Bird, and it got knocked off because I came in on Toxapex. That's not good. I think this Pokemon already has exceeded my own expectations. I thought it was a little bit passive. I see now that there's a lot of finer qualities to it. Even if you stay into taunt, you risk Scald Burns or knockoffs now. I think it's a very interesting pick, a very good utility wall in the draft, and I'm not necessarily saying I'm gonna pick it, but it's much higher up on my list than it was before. Not just because of knockoff, because I've also seen this Pokemon and what it can do, not just on the ladder, but Craig actually used it really, really well in his last season. He actually got the playoffs last year. And I thought Toxapex would be a huge liability, but is more or less one of the MVPs. I was quite surprised that Hippowdon got the defensive MVP because I even voted for Toxapex. That thing messed with so many teams, and I did not. Again, I undersold it from the get-go. Knockoff Toxapex adds to its utility. I'm excited to potentially use it in a league format. Now, I also wanted to talk about the new Pokemon for just a second. Again, not going to get into too much detail, partly because I like my videos short and sweet, but there's so much here that I just don't know. I don't know its full move set yet. I just want to kind of gloss the upshot of things and maybe some shortcomings in how I see them fitting into the bigger picture. Naganandel, however you say this, the evolved form of that cute little poison guy, aka Ultra Beedrill, is one Pokemon that is really exciting to me. It has a base 121 speed stat, if you didn't know, and a 127 special attack. The rest of its base stats are 73. It's Poison and Dragon, and it has Beast Boost. I'm looking at this Pokemon with 121 speed and 127 special attack and pretty decent coverage with Beast Boost, and I see maybe one of the more potent revenge killers in the format. Poison and Dragon is pretty handily resisted by steel types, but with a base 127 special attack and some decent coverage moves like Heat Wave, for instance, which it gets, this Pokemon's going to be a problem, guys. Like, especially once it gets out of control, you're going to have to probably slide in some sneaky Scarf Pokemon to catch that 121 speed. It's going to be a good Scarf Pokemon in itself. Those Beast Boosts are going to rack up quick. It has some other like interesting coverage moves, like if you're going to go down Tailwind, Shockwave, for instance. Not that you would probably use that over Heat Wave or just standard stab, but maybe you're really weak to Gyarados or something. I don't know. I'm one of those people who kind of believes that in certain situations anything could work. But finding those situations is easier said than done. But anyway, yeah, I'm really excited to use this Pokemon in the draft. Really excited to see it put in work. It's going to be high on my list. I'm not sure if I'll get the chance to use it because we know how new toy syndrome goes, but I think it'll be really, really good for any team to pick up, really. And I include this little guy because now that we know that we have an Ultra Beast that evolves, I can't remember. I think its stats are like 73 across the board, which makes it a pretty decent Eviolite user and Toxic Spikes Absorber. I'm not sure how an Eviolite Pokemon with Beast Boost, like how useful that could really be. Frankly, I don't think it will be, but you never know. I'm not gonna rule this little guy out. If he does get Toxic Spikes, and you just really want T-Spikes on your team and are weak to fairies or something, I don't know. Maybe you might pick this little guy up. Who knows? Of course, we have Blacephalon. Not sure what that name's supposed to be. I thought it was like supposed to be Blast and Cephalopod, but it doesn't really look like an octopus to me. Definitely looks like a clown made out of that like weird button candy that's just like pure sugar and food coloring in it. And it's not very good. But I think this Pokemon is going to be fantastic. What we do know is that it's Fire and Ghost, of course. We have base 107 speed, 151 special attack, 127 physical attack, and pretty shit defenses, but you're not going to use this Pokemon defensively. Even though Fire and Ghost is decent defensive typing, as we've seen in the meta with the fairies running around and all that, offensively, this Pokemon is a monster. It has access to knockoff as well, and foul play, meaning so you can't really set up on it. You could throw a Scarf on it and outspeed like a common Dragon Dance user and make use of that. It has Pain Split to get health back, Recycle. So you know that move that it rips off its head and throws it and takes half its health, but it's like insanely powerful. I think they said base 150. Let's say you've got your nice Clutch Berry or your Citrus Berry or whatever, and you just recycle it. I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of opportunities to use that because of how bad its defenses is. But offensively, this Pokemon is a huge threat. Of course, with Beast Boost, that makes it all the more threatening. And I expect it to have a pretty significant impact on any meta, honestly. Like, I think this is going to be one of those Pokemon that you just see a lot of, regardless of what format you play. Draft will be no exception, in my estimation. And I think any team that's looking for, I was gonna say strong special attacker, but yeah, that base 127 physical attack, like you can run either way with this. This thing is gonna be tough to prepare for. I think it's gonna be a really awesome choice for your draft league. And probably my favorite little design, Zerora, Ruby, which is actually a cat. I don't know why I'm doing that. He's an electric type with Volt Absorb. He's a mythical. Base 143 speed. Decent defensive stats. We got 88, 75, 80, and his attacking stats are 112 and 102. The thing that stands out to me, of course, is the speed stat. Base 143 means it's probably going to be faster than just about everything that you're going to see outside of the occasional Excelgor, Electrode, if anybody drafts that. I'm trying to think of anything above 140 base speed. Mega Pokemon, of course. You got a couple 150s out there. Ninjask. I don't know why you would draft Ninjask, but hey, to each his own. Zeraora is one of the more interesting, really fast Pokemon. And one of the things I've made a point of in the past, I don't want to say it took criticism, but I took a little bit of heat for drafting Alakazam, Mega Alakazam, in Season 2. And one of the things I really liked about having a Pokemon that fast, and Zeraora is kind of in that boat as well, is you actually limit what Pokemon can become effective choice scarf users. Now, being just a bit slower than Alakazam, I think, and I haven't figured this out, I'm guessing it's going to be somewhere near 80. It has to be at least base 80 speed to outspeed this Pokemon with a choice scarf. So you can't sneak again, this could be off, but like you can't sneak a Buzzwole with a 79 and expect it to be able to revenge kill this guy. And he might be able to come back with some coverage moves. I know he gets Fire Punch. Fast Pokemon tend to get some like flying moves, so maybe he gets that. Maybe he gets that Z. Maybe he uses a Z move, that Inferno Overdrive, and gets him back. I like this Pokemon a lot. Not necessarily early in the draft though. Like I love the design and everything, but its offensive stats are slightly underwhelming. The speed, of course, makes it really fun to use and sort of limiting in some of your opponent's preparations. Having mixed attacking stats I like, as well as that electric immunity and Volt Absorb to deter teams that like to abuse Volt Switch and things like that. Oh, it does get bounce. It gets bounce, so you can Supersonic Sky Strike that Buzzwole, by the way. It gets a lot of interesting coverage moves. One of the ones that I'm looking at, as well as like an Electro Web. If you've got a team with a solid counter, because again, the offensive stats aren't that good, you can slow it down a little bit on the switch. Maybe, I don't know if it gets any pivot moves. I assume it's an electric type. It'll get Volt Switch. You could, scoot on out of there. It also gets access to Knock Off, Drain Punch, Focus Punch, Endeavor. We might see some kind of lead set with this. If it gets, I don't know if it gets hazards or whatever. Not too many electric Pokemon do, but you never know. Maybe he has some little spikes in those. Maybe he like spits them out. He could have spikes here. Who knows? I think this is like a mid-round pick. You're like, oh shit, my team's really slow. I need something fast, and I'd like an electric immunity. Boom, this guy. I don't know what Plasma Fist does. If I heard correctly, it turns normal moves into electric ones, and with an ability like Volt Absorb, this is really handy for if you're weak to something like Swellow or X-Plowed, like really good wall breakers that rely on normal type coverage. Something like a Snorlax probably doesn't love dealing with this thing, although Snorlax gets Earthquake and they can prepare accordingly, but that's something that you can take into account as well. I see some utility in this. I don't see a ton of diversity again, but the speed stat, the decent offensive presence, I think it's a good pick, just not early in the draft. And finally, the last one I'm going to talk about is but probably my least favorite, but my favorite move, Stakataka. And I chose this picture because it's actually a funny meme. Trunks trumps leaked wall plans. What's extra funny about this is that they're both terrible ideas and never should have happened. Anyway, Stakataka has the unfortunate typing Rock and Steel, giving it a lot of quad weaknesses, which sucks in draft because it's really easy to prepare for, particularly when it's Rock and Steel and fighting in Earthquake are pretty widespread coverage moves. And given it's so one of the things is like, oh yeah, it's a defensive Pokemon with a lot of bulk. It's got 211 base defense and 101 base special defense, which is good, but it's backed by 61 HP, which is not good. And when you have that many weaknesses, I don't think this Pokemon is going to have a particularly strong impact on any meta that is in. The one niche I can see it fulfilling, I guess, is if it's like a lead, because it does get Magic Coat. I assume it'll get like Stealth Rocks or something. It actually does have access to Magnet Rise, but with base 13 speed, how many chances are you going to get to pull that off? And even if you do it, that doesn't remove the fighting weakness. The Spadef isn't good enough to take even powerful neutral hits, I don't think. Like, again, 101's not bad, but the HP's low. If you max Spadef it out, maybe. But I just don't see this doing a whole lot. The one niche I see, besides that maybe Suicide Lead, which why would you draft that for that when there's so many better ones? It has an interesting base 131 attack. And with 13 speed and 131 attack, if it has more powerful moves than in its level up set, maybe it could be effective on a trick room mode, and maybe it fills a particular niche. Like you need a Pokemon that gets rocks. Again, I don't know if it does, but you need a Pokemon that gets rocks. The Magic Coat is nice to bounce back taunt, and you have a trick room mode. This can kind of fill in those blanks decently well. Again, though, I don't see this having a tremendous impact because of its many shortcomings, and the things that it is good at are shaky at best. So anyway, that's all I'm going to cover. This video is already longer than I anticipated. Sorry if I talked kind of fast. I knew there was a lot of things I wanted to go through, but I wanted to sort of put a draft perspective on all the new things that are coming out for those of you getting as hyped as I am. I know I wasn't super excited about Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon from the beginning because it looked like the exact same game, but the leaks have proven that there's quite a bit of new stuff in here. It definitely feels like a brand new Pokemon experience. So I'm looking forward to it, and if you are too, go ahead and leave a comment. I'd love to talk to you about it. Also, follow me on Twitter. You see down at the bottom here on the screen, you have me, Kevin VGC. Also, follow the CIL, which is the best draft league ever, probably. Ask anyone in it. It's a good time. Very casual. It's called the Casualness Intensifies League, if you didn't know. And it's awesome. So check it out. A lot of good battlers, very casual and intense. I'm not sure which one is greater, though. That'll be up to the coaches. You'll have to ask them. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. And looking forward to seeing you all in the Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon meta. See you guys.